And we're going to look briefly at Chapter 2. Now, I want to detour a little bit as we talk about Chapter 2. If you are a undergraduate student, you're required to have a number of ethics courses in order to get your Bachelor of Business. If you're a graduate student, most of our graduate programs include ethics courses. So for me, I think ethics is extremely important, and we're going to spend a few minutes with this chapter, but because we have ethics in other courses in all of our programs, I don't want to take time away from the important legal work that is only covered in this course for ethical principles that are covered in other courses as well. But I don't want that to be interpreted as I don't think it's important, because I think ethics are more important than law. The very simple way of saying that is do the right thing. Sometimes you can be legally right, but it's not the right thing to do. A good example of that now is I have waived rent for some of my tenants because of either illness or because of COVID-19. Their businesses were not doing well, and I said, I will not take rent from you. I'll bear the loss rather than have you struggle with it. I have a friend who has rental property, and he gave his tenants a rent holiday in the midst of the COVID-19 to try and help them out. Was he legally required to do that? No. Did he do it because it was the right thing? Yes. So ethics, in my opinion, is always beyond law, and I think that's a very good way for people to do business. So anyway, just a thought on that. But what we want to do is to focus on the fact that when we look at law, a lot of times we look at some issues and we say, gee, this person should not have done that. Not that it is illegal, but they should not have done that. And so it's something that's important to look at from that standpoint. Most of you are familiar with the fact that we've got different systems of ethical analysis. I happen to be a big supporter of Kant. They call it, in this particular chapter, they call it Kantianism. I don't agree with that term. I would just say I agree with Kant's theories. Basically, they're based on the concept there is right in the world. There are certain things that are right and wrong, and I kind of subscribe to that. And then there's another system that's called teleological or consequential that says it's, and the leading subject under that is utilitarianism. That says, and oftentimes that's expressed as the most good for the most people. Now, one of the most interesting cases in in the United States since the year 2000, and a massive case for the greater Houston economy, was the failure of Enron. Enron failed, I think it was October of 2001. And it was an extraordinary event. It had a major negative impact on the city of Houston. It is a name that will live in infamy for many decades to come. And Jeff Skilling was one of the key people in Enron, one of the people at the top of the pyramid. He was not number one. There was Ken Lay was number one, and Ken Lay conveniently dropped dead after he was found guilty and sentenced to, I think, 14 years in prison, and never served any of them because he collapsed and died. But in any event, the board of directors all benefited in the short run. One of the things they did was many of the employees had all of their 401k invested in Enron stock. Somehow Enron froze the employee accounts. They froze the employee accounts, and they continued to trade their own private stock of many of them had tens of thousands of shares, and they sold their shares at $60 and $50 a share. By the time the 401k was allowed to trade, believe it or not, was allowed to trade, the stock had dropped to 20 cents, from $60 to 20 cents. That's how cataclysmic the failure of Enron was in the early 2000s. And so it's become a poster child for mistreatment of people. And the outcome of the Enron and several other large corporate scandals that happened around the same time, Adelphia Cable and WorldCom and HealthSouth, Tyco, all of these huge corporate scandals happened fairly close together. And oftentimes they were based on what we call pumping the stock, unfairly portraying the success of the company in order to get people to buy the stock. And of course, since these people held large numbers of shares of stock, they were able to create wealth for themselves while penalizing others. So it's very interesting. But in any event, these folks, Jeff Skilling and Ken Lay and others, were found guilty. Andy Fastow, were found guilty of, knowingly committing fraud. So this is a sample ethical analysis framework. And just to point out to you that I did include a similar ethical framework in the syllabus for the course. All the syllabi that I prepare do have a statement of ethics. So how do you make sure your employees behave in an ethical manner? First of all, you at the top, you leaders, need to act ethically. You need to set a good standard for the people who report to you. And then you need to cultivate an ethical culture of all of your employees to understand that doing the right thing is the principle of your company. And then you embrace an ethical structure of corporate governance. So one of the other ways that we express the responsibility is something called corporate social responsibility. We also often just say CSR. So if you hear the acronym CSR or you see corporate social responsibility, what we're talking about there is a corporation doing more than is legally required. And as you know, many companies today have been more generous with their employees than they might not want to be. And so it's a situation that is pretty important. So one of the reasons why do you care if you're behaving in a socially responsible manner? Well, the comparative ones, and I guess if you say game theory is what we see in the movie Wall Street, where Gordon Gekko, the lead perpetrator in the movie, says, greed is good. Greed is good. So that's kind of game theory. Let me do the best I can for myself and the heck with everybody else. Social contract theory, on the other hand, says if we want other people to deal fairly with us, we need to deal fairly with other people. One of the other models these are kind of incorporated. So in other words, looking at the previous slide, social contract theory leads into other models of examination. These two are not separate from each other. The stakeholder model says that it used to be, when I was in business school, when I got my MBA, we were told that our boss was the stockholder, that everything that we did needed to be a direct benefit to our stockholders. Today, we take a slightly different view, and that's called the stakeholder, to be distinguished from shareholder. So shareholder is someone that actually owns a stock certificate or more, and a stakeholder includes those stockholders, but it also includes the employees, the vendors, the members of the community where these businesses operate, and so forth. So that's very important for people to see that stakeholder is a broader model of responsibility than just saying we're going to take care of the stockholders. And so there's some balancing being done there. And then secondly, one of the things that we call a company that's practicing social responsibility, one of the way to measure that performance is something called triple bottom line. Triple bottom line means that the company is taking care of its employees and vendors and also taking care of the environment. And that's hard to measure, by the way. One of the things is that we do think a little bit about the concept of legal reasoning. Deductive reasoning, the best way to approach that is Sherlock Holmes. Remember the fictional character by Arthur Conan Doyle, and his mastery was to deduce from the evidence who had committed the crime. That was deductive reasoning. Analogical reading is more common to what we do as business people, is to say, I've got a situation that looks like this situation. I should do this because that's what's happened in the past. Either I shouldn't do that again, or I should do it the same way. So one of the suggested approaches, if you're looking at how something might come out, is, and this again is more law school related than it is to business applications, but this is what we're taught in law school. Identify the legal question, what are the rules that apply to it, how do the laws apply to this specific situation, and then what should we do? But this, again, is legal, not necessarily ethical. I love this sentence. Legal reasoning may lead to more than one correct answer to a legal problem. Well, that's not very helpful if you think about it, but sometimes it's not a question of what's legal, it's a question of what's right. Now, one of the areas I wanted to mention here is the issue of jurisprudence. I am not a big fan of jurisprudence for even attorneys and law students. I certainly am not worried about it for us business people. So as a business person, whether you think that the law comes from natural law or positive law, I don't care. And again, we're not testing you on chapters 1 through 6 anyway, but just so you know, it's certainly you're welcome to read it. It may be of interest to you, but it's not something that we're overly concerned about in business.